All right, here we are. Oh, yeah. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and I have my colleague and friend, Brian Berletic of the New Atlas on the show. How's it going, Brian?
Hello, I had the tab open. I always yell at Angelo on my live streams for that, and then I just did it. So I apologize. Thank you so much for having me back, and I look forward to our discussion.
No problem at all. Brian, let's start off. The $1 trillion budget. The $1 trillion budget. Now, I did a premium stream earlier this morning, and I pointed out that HUD, the Office of HUD, said that it would take $20 billion to erase homelessness and another $40 billion to erase poverty completely out of the United States. The United States allocated at least $172.4 billion to Ukraine, and the United States is bragging about upping the weapons budget, the war budget to over $1 trillion. How is that America's first when they're neglecting the homeless, when they're neglecting the people in America that needs the help badly?
Well, here's the trick. When President Donald Trump and his administration talk about America first, you have to understand what they mean by America. They're not talking about the American people. That's just the gimmick during campaign season. To them, what is America? America is a handful of corporate financier monopolies, including corporations like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing, also big oil, big finance, big pharma, big ag, and so on and so forth. And if you look at I was just reading it, a record $1 trillion defense budget. So this is the peace president rolling out a $1 trillion plus. And just as we were talking about right before we went live, every single one of the programs within this $1 trillion budget is almost certainly going to go over schedule and over budget. So it will be much larger than $1 trillion. It was a very good point that you made right before we went live. And so how do you reconcile this with the premise, the campaign promises made by Trump during the campaign, the presidential campaign, and now what we see going on? We can see all of the wars he promised he was going to end continue unabated, uninterrupted, and there are now additional wars being planned, laid out, and in the case of Yemen, being fought right now and escalated as we speak. And if you look, again, I always tell people, President Trump didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, Pete, can you just put together a $1 trillion defense budget? No, this is the deep state. This is what they had planned all along. Everything that they have been saying for years and years has been, we need more money. We need to expand out the military. We need to go fight with Russia, China, and Iran all at the same time. We need the ability to do that. And that's how you end up with a $1 trillion defense budget. You don't get a $1 trillion defense budget when you're planning on withdrawing from unipolar hegemony and focusing inward on America. That's not how you get a $1 trillion defense budget. You get it by continuing empire. And as empire becomes more and more unsustainable, and as your declared adversaries, countries that actually are not interested in war with the U.S. at all in any shape, form, or way, as they react to your endless aggression, you need to continue ramping up your own militarism, your own expansionism. And so that's what we're watching in real time. And, there are a lot of people who are starting to wake up with the tariffs. I saw a lot of people who had been very enthusiastically supportive, or even so-so, but more supportive than not, of President Trump and his administration. There's like a few people who just kind of woke up and they're like, what is he doing? What is this? This is not what we were told. And this $1 trillion defense budget is another major wake-up call for these people.
Mm. I want to play a little short clip for you, and I want to get your take on it right after the clip. It's about 1.5 minutes. So
on
check
Wall
this out.
Street, some early gains led to hopes the tariff turbulence has calmed down. But by trading day's end, we were back in the red. Take a look here. The Dow tumbled more than 300 points. The NASDAQ lost 335 points. And the S&P ended down almost 80 points. Let's bring in our NBC 10 consumer investigative reporter, Bianca Beltran. Bianca, what is the latest from the White House?
Well, Priscilla, the White House says not only is President Trump not backing down, he's threatening even more tariffs on China if China does not remove the tariffs it placed on the U.S. At midnight tonight, the president says he'll add 50% higher tariffs on China, bringing the total amount to 104%. Now, this in response to China putting 34% tariffs on the U.S., which it did after the U.S. put 34% tariffs on them. Now, the U.S. and China are the world's two biggest economies, and as long as we're fighting, the markets may keep taking hits. Now, in response to Trump's threat, China's Ministry of Commerce had this to say, quote, "The countermeasures China has taken are aimed at safeguarding its sovereignty, security, and development interests and maintaining the normal international trade order." Now, the president isn't finding much support for his tariffs in the Senate. Today, his trade representative appeared before the Senate Finance Committee. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren said she didn't disagree with tariffs as a concept, but takes issue with how the president is going about it.
Tariffs can be a tool to help build things in America, but Trump has slapped tariffs on, then off again with no rhyme or reason.
Neither the White House nor its trade advisor have given a timeline about when the president expects to lift the tariffs. Until then, hold tight and maybe don't look at those 401ks.
So, Brian, as always, in the West, we live in bizarro world where up is down and down is up, in is out, and out is in. Now, when the West escalates something or they hit someone, they'll say, don't respond or else we will do X, Y, Z. In other words, saying disarm yourself and let us have a free against you, and you just take it. And what is to say about this policy measure of the peace president as he attacks the entire world?
Well, we were talking about this earlier this week about these tariffs, and what the United States is trying to do is very obvious. President Trump can say all he wants about fighting the deep state, but this is a deep state imperative: maintaining American primacy at all costs, and that's what all of these tariffs are aimed at doing. And the primary target is China. China is a country that is, in terms of population, 4 to 5 times larger than the United States. They have a much larger industrial base than the United States. I talk about this all the time. They graduate millions more every single year in terms of science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They have world-class infrastructure the United States could not make, not now, not in a decade. You will never see the type of infrastructure Chinese citizens enjoy, the United States will never have, not as long as this system prevails over the United States. And so how do you compete with a country that is larger, stronger, becoming more and more powerful, and even in terms of military power, leveling the playing field? What do? You try to flip the game board over, destroy absolutely everything, disrupt the game in such a malice and unpredictable way that's you just hope that maybe China isn't willing to go as far and as extreme as the U.S. is in terms of protecting itself against American ambitions to maintain primacy. U.S. primacy, Western primacy over the globe makes zero sense. It is irrational, is unsustainable, and for the United States, which represents about 4% of the entire global population, to demand primacy over the 95 or 96% of the rest of the world is completely insane. The United States could and should reindustrialize, but that doesn't have to be done through tactics like this by threatening global stability. They could do it slowly, gradually, incrementally, in a way that would benefit both the United States overall, the American people at home, without crushing them with the inflation that we see for 8 years now already, crushing the American people. I'm an American. I have friends and family who are still in the United States. And all I've heard for the last 8 years, since Trump began the tariffs, since Joe Biden continued all of the tariffs and added more on top of that, and now this new wave of tariffs following all of that, this is crushing the American people, and this could be done without doing that. But the goal here is not to revitalize American industry and take care of the American people. It is about maintaining primacy at all costs. These special interests in Washington and on Wall Street, who Washington answers to, they're not the ones paying for this. Everyone paying for this are the nations the U.S. uses as proxies against their adversaries abroad, and even the American people at home. They are the ones that absorb all of the consequences, and they pick up all of the benefits. And what they do with their left, right, woke, conservative mind games is they convince the American people utterly that their neighbors are their enemies. Washington and Wall Street don't even register on their radar. And that's why they continue to get away with this, because all I hear is people say, well, Brian, at least it's not Kamala Harris. It's better than Joe Biden. Brian, aren't you glad all the DEI is all gone from USAID? I'm still watching USAID and the NED function uninterrupted all around the globe. And it was a bait and switch. It was a limited hangout. All of these things that the Trump administration is doing. All of the fundamental problems that everyone was complaining about under Biden have not only persisted under Trump, they are expanding. And people are blinded by it because of their partisan mindset, which is intentionally created. It's intentionally created.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to Flying Crocodile for the $20 donation. The super chat. Thank you so much, Brian. So why do you think, and I have to ask you this, you and I, we talk about this stuff behind the scene, but why do you think so many people are blinded? They'll see the reality of what Trump is doing, yet they'll ignore the reality for illusion. Why are they so hung up? Because we had that in the Obama term. We've had that in the Biden term. Why are they so hung up on personalities instead of policies?
This is just an unfortunate aspect of human nature. Human beings are almost always going to cave into their emotions before they allow reason and logic to prevail. It's something that every human being, including myself, has to wrestle with. If you do it often enough, it becomes a habit, but it is not something that comes natural to anybody, I don't think. And because of that, and because ordinary Americans, and I have people in America reminding me of this, they're saying, well, Brian, you're asking a lot. These are people who are struggling just to stay above water. And that's true. It's absolutely true. People are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs. And if they're in a relationship, both people in the relationship are working. They can't afford to have kids. If they end up with kids, which often happens, obviously, they're struggling with that. They have to pick between, I got something going on with my health. I feel terrible. And if I go to work, I'm probably going to get sicker still, but I can't afford to miss work because I got all these bills that I've got to pay. And should I go to the doctor because I don't really have decent insurance? And even if I do, they're just going to pay some of it. And then I have all of these bills to pay. And every time I go to the store to buy anything for the last 8 years, the prices have been going up. And so, I always hear people talking about raise minimum wage, raise wages. You can't just raise wages. What you have to do is lower the cost of living. That is how you help people. Because if you raise wages, these corporations, what are they going to do? They're just going to, if they have to pay more to their employees, they're going to increase the price of absolutely everything. So you're getting more and you're thinking, wow, I'm making so much more. But if everything costs more, did they really raise your wage? No. And they know people can't figure this out. And so they get away with it over and over again. I see the US-backed political parties here in Thailand do the same trick every election cycle. We're going to raise wages. And then as soon as they do, every company is like, well, we're paying more. We have to raise costs for everything. And it hurts. It hurts more than it helps. It's a trick. It's used to trick people. It's not used to help people. And that's what both parties in Washington are doing, because both parties in Washington ultimately work for Wall Street, not for you. President Donald Trump does not work for the American people. He himself is a callous billionaire, and he works for even bigger billionaires. One other thing I wanted to say, because we started by talking about this $1 trillion Defense Department budget. If you go to Project 2025, again, these aren't ideas that just sprouted in President Trump's mind. These are neocon, corporate-funded think tanks that laid all of this out before you even stepped foot in office. If you read Project 2025 and you go to the Defense Department chapter and you type in the word increase, when you hit Control F to search for a particular term, you will see increase all throughout the document. Increase the Army spending, Navy, Air Force, increase Lockheed Martin HIMARS, increase the production of Lockheed Martin F-35 fighters. And so that's what this is all about. And why? Why are they doing that? Because we need to stay ahead of China. China is not allowed to surpass the collective West, no matter how irrational it is to say that. It'd be like Portugal saying, we cannot allow the United States to be a more powerful country than us. You remember the Portuguese Empire? We cannot allow America to surpass us. It's delusional. It's irrational. And this is the mindset the United States is locked in. And one more thing before we continue, I want to urge people to at least skip through a congressional hearing. They have these hearings several times a month on all different types of topics, and they bring in the think tank experts who are driving U.S. foreign and domestic policy. And you can hear the genuine mindset that is taking place inside their heads when they're not at a podium talking to the public. And you could hear how bipartisan this all is, how all on board they are with tariffs to crush China and meddling abroad. And they openly talk about regime change all around the globe. People who support Trump and, quote unquote, dismantling U.S. aid and NED, they all admit that it wasn't dismantled, that all of these programs continue. They've been streamlined. They have to update it to keep ahead. Nothing is changing. It's actually just getting worse. And they're using this rhetoric and this make America great again. This is a smokescreen. That continuity of agenda is continuing behind.
Shout out to Dino Pantalakis. I'm sorry I butchered your name. A $10 super chat. I'm sorry I butchered your name. But there's an article on RT and it's titled U.S. delivers Panama Canal ultimatum to China. And in it says the Pentagon chief has announced a series of bold steps to secure the crucial waterway. The United States has vowed to take back the Panama Canal from Chinese influence and has launched a series of military deployments and joint exercises with Panama to reinforce that commitment, according to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Before we go further, you see how arrogant that is? The United States has vowed to take back. It's not theirs. It's Panama's canal. Hence the name, the Panama Canal. But let's go a little further. It says the Pentagon chief attended the inauguration of a new U.S. finance dock at the Vasco Núñez de Balboa Naval Base on Tuesday, touting the facility as a symbol of the shared commitment to the canal security following President Donald Trump's repeated threats to reclaim the key waterway. Quote, China did not build this canal. China does not operate this canal, and China will not weaponize this canal. As if China tried, as Hegseth declared in his speech. Together, quote again, together we will take back the Panama Canal from China's influence, and we will do this along with other capable, like-minded allies and partners. This is what peace through strength looks like. So what he's saying is peace through strength is antagonizing, it is provoking, it is setting up straw men to knock down, to justify your stance and your position, to dominate the world. You are making a boogeyman. You're saying that you're taking this back and China will not weaponize it when China has never weaponized it or even claimed to want to weaponize it. And the only person that wants to weaponize it is the United States so that it can control the trade routes and hold these nations' economies hostage. What do you have to say? And remember, this is being done under the peace president now, not under Biden, but under the peace president. So go ahead, Brian.
Yes, the peace president who's preaching peace through strength, which in reality, and we mentioned this before, we weren't even talking for that long before the live stream started. We keep hearing peace through strength. But what we're getting is peace through perpetual war. And what it is just a blatant lie. It is a blatant lie. The U.S. has been at war every single day since President Trump stepped into office. And it's not like President Trump is special in this regard. The U.S. has been at constant war since the turn of the 21st century. It is the obviously, demonstrably most dangerous nation in terms of peace, prosperity, and progress on planet Earth. And it has been that way well before the turn of the century. But just looking at the 21st century alone, It's so obvious. And it doesn't matter which president has been in office. And you can see how each war is passed off to the next and how each president prepares the grounds for future conflicts that the deep state wants to wage. And we watched President Donald Trump do this in his first 4 years in office. And now he's continuing to do it this next 4 years in office. And about the Panama Canal specifically, we have been talking about this since this obsession with the Panama Canal began. And we talked about long-standing U.S. policies talking about we can't fight China head on. They're just too big. We're not going to fight and win a war against China off their own shores. But what we can do, because, and they admit the Chinese military is not designed to project power around the globe like the U.S. military is. They have one base in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, and this is under a UN mission. And the U.S. has hundreds and hundreds of bases all around the globe. And so what the U.S. is talking about is, just as you say, holding maritime trade globally hostage and specifically targeting Chinese maritime trade. That is the plan. And they have said it. They're directly linking this obsession with the Panama Canal to China. They're also linking their obsession over Greenland and annexing it with China and also Russia. And not only was this all mentioned in Project 2025 and the America First initiative, these think tanks linked to the Trump administration, but since coming into office, because some people might say, well, these are two separate things. The administration itself, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, they put out a report talking about how Russia and China, Iran, North Korea, all of the designated boogeymen of the deep state, how these are also the boogeymen of this Trump administration supposedly fighting the deep state. And so again, it's all laid out obvious, blatantly obvious. People are in denial. They don't want to admit that they were duped. But I just want to tell people, especially, and you remember the tone in the comment section in this live stream and other live streams like a couple of months ago, how people were saying, Brian, I think you've lost your mind. Brian, you have Trump derangement syndrome. He hasn't even been in office for a week yet, and you're saying all these things, and yet we were completely right about all of this because it's in the policy papers. Empire is not something you can keep secret. You have to put it on paper. You have to build consensus around this. And they do it through these policy papers. They do it through the mainstream media. And if you know where to look, you can find the blueprints just laying out in the open. They know ordinary people aren't going to read it. They're not going to get it. They're not going to want to get it because we're showing this to people. And there's still people that are looking at it and they're still saying, no, I don't believe it. I think President Trump's going to save us all. So it's tragic. You're watching. It's almost like a cult that got into a bus, and they think that when the bus goes off the cliff, it's going to fly up into the sky and ascend into heaven. But we all know that that's not going to happen. This is going over the cliff in flames, and it's where this is going. It's so painful to watch. It really is, and it has consequences for all of us too. I mean, it's not just those people that are going to suffer. We are all going to suffer as well.
Yeah. Brian Brooke Chen says, when do you think Trump or any of his cabinet officials visit China? I believe they sent an ambassador there one time, didn't they?
I don't know, but does it matter? Because you remember during the first Trump administration, he met with President Xi Jinping. I don't know if he went to China. I don't really pay attention to these things, but especially in the beginning, he was all about, oh, I have such a great relationship with him. We can work together. And again, this was to prey on people who thought President Trump was a break from the deep state, when in reality, he was just continuing it all. And we saw how that fake diplomacy with both Russia and China, how that ended up manifesting itself as continuity of agenda. And we're watching it take place again at record pace. There is no real honeymoon. He was saying that he was going to make peace with the world, as he was obviously overtly laying the ground for escalation. So during his first 4 years in office, that was the beginning of the tariffs, which again continued under Biden. So it's not, oh, Trump is fighting the deep state and then Biden undid it all. No, he built on top of it. What does that tell you? Use your brain. think logically. What does that tell you? When he takes supposedly deep state policies and he builds on them and expands them, that tells you that it's a deep state policy. And it was all directed at China. The U.S., between the Obama administration, Trump, 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden, and now the Trump administration again, they are openly preparing for war with China. They are openly pursuing the encirclement and containment of Russia, China, and Iran, and everyone in between. And that is what we are watching. The U.S. is not deviating from that. And this is what people need to wake up to and fight back against, because all of us will pay the consequences for all of these policies, not the people actually enacting them.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about another article? And the title of it is "Trump Slaps Proud China with 104% Tariffs." And the first part of it says the U.S. president has vowed to keep levies in place until Beijing makes a deal. The United States has hiked tariffs on all Chinese imports to a staggering 104%, escalating the ongoing trade conflict and wiping out another $1.5 trillion from the U.S. stock markets on Tuesday. Is this guy's sound and thinking, or is he just throwing stuff up against the wall to see if it's going to stick?
Well, we were talking about this over the last week, the live stream that we did together. We were talking about how the plan is to just destroy it. We're just going to destroy everything because we have lost control of it. And you have to think, I'm seeing people who I know have been rational. I might not agree with everything that they say, but like David Sachs is one of these billionaires connected to the Trump administration now. And I remember before he began that role with the Trump administration, he used to say some things that made sense. And now he's talking about we're being ripped off. This whole system that the U.S. is now kicking and screaming about was created by and for the U.S. The whole plan, just a moment. I have a radio in the background. I'm going to turn it off and I'll be right back. I'm sorry. My apologies. Just a moment.
Okay, no problem. So everyone, hold on. We'll mute him for 1 second. Let him handle what he has to handle. Unmute him as soon as he comes back. We're good. Oh, there he is, right here.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I was talking about all of these countries supposedly ripping off the United States. The whole plan was to take advantage of cheap labor and a permissive environment in terms of regulations and workers' rights, and exploit cheap labor all around the globe and transform the U.S. economy into a service economy. And China specifically, and Asia overall, the U.S. wanted to subordinate them permanently to the U.S. And there were attempts to overthrow the political order in China. Do we remember the Tiananmen Square incident? The U.S. refers to as the Tiananmen Massacre. I've gone over this many times over the years. There are diplomatic cables within the U.S. There are old U.S. and European media reports about all of that. That was a color revolution. That was a U.S.-backed color revolution. The mobs were the ones killing, torching, hanging police and soldiers who were unarmed in the beginning. And they had to bring in a special unit with weapons and trained to use those weapons. They had to bring them in to stop the massacre that was taking place. And then, of course, just like the U.S. does about everything, they lied about it then to the public, and they have continuously lied about it ever since. But that was an attempt to overthrow the Chinese political order, install a client regime into power that would have subordinated China indefinitely to the U.S., much in the way, say, the Philippines here in Southeast Asia is completely subordinated to the U.S. There's nothing they can do to get out from under America's thumb. And there's other countries like that around the globe that are they're so dependent on the U.S. They're never getting out from under U.S. control. Ukraine is another example. This is what they wanted to do to China and make China permanently this source of cheap labor they could exploit to build up their economy at home and maintain their hegemony abroad. That was the plan. And it failed. The Chinese people worked hard, and they worked their way out from under the thumb of the United States. They not only excelled in manufacturing industry, They began investing in education and infrastructure. And then they started creating their own companies. Technology and the means to research and develop it began proliferating all around the globe, but especially in places like China that were deliberately pursuing this as a policy. And then you wake up one day and you have Chinese companies. Remember, Rashid, all of the jokes about Chinese junk and how not to be crude, but Chinese stuff is crap. It's cheap crap. And now look at it. You have American companies that literally cannot compete under any circumstance. Even when the U.S. is putting 100% tariffs on Chinese products, they cannot compete with Chinese companies. They have surpassed the U.S. They have surpassed the collective West. And then you hear, they're stealing our intellectual property. There's no way these Chinese people possibly be innovating better than we can. We all know that Asian people can't innovate, but they are. And they have technology that the U.S. simply doesn't have. So where did they steal that from? That's the big question that a lot of Americans and Westerners in general, they don't want to ask. They don't even want to think about. So the U.S. woke up one day where their exploitative global spanning system blew up in their face. And instead of looking at themselves and saying, what did we do wrong? They're saying, China's ripping us off. The rest of the world is ripping us off. We're going to blow everything up and we're going to remake this system so once again it's serving us and our interests at the expense of everyone else. That's what's going on right now. And when I say everyone else, I include the American people in that. The American people are going to pay a heavy price for this too. There is no shiny future for the American people in this story.
Mm-hmm. Before we transition to Iran, excuse me, I noticed that most of the alternative media, when they talk about the situation that is taking place between NATO and the Russians, and how they're saying that America needs to come up with a deal with Russia because they have more pressing problems to deal with China, as almost to pass the buck and say China is the threat. And I don't know if it's subconsciously done or whatever, but it seems like they are willing, even in their conversations, they discuss it so nonchalantly as though they're willing to go along with a cessation of violence against the Russians in order to make war or to confront China. And it is being said like it's no thing. Why is that, Brian?
Well, I mean, the craziest thing is they're trying to trick the Russians. They're trying to trick the Russians into thinking they genuinely want peace with Russia in Ukraine, to the extent where they're pretending they're mediators and they're saying, we'll help you make peace with Ukraine. And we'll be the mediators and we'll just meet with us and we'll work all of this out. And look at Ukraine derailing the peace process. Look at those Europeans derailing the peace process. But unless I was hallucinating, on February 12th, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth laid out the whole plan. The whole plan is to force Russia into a ceasefire, move European troops into Ukraine to cement the ceasefire, make it impossible for Russia to undo, rebuild their military industrial base, pump Ukraine full of weapons, rebuild their military for round two. They said it openly, publicly, and they put it on the Department of Defense website. And we'll say, that's crazy. Why did they say that publicly? But look at how many Trump supporters, including very intelligent people who do analysis, look at how many people have sidestepped that blueprint that was just pasted on the wall for all to see. And they sidestepped it, and they're still going with the narrative, U.S. wants peace, Ukraine is trying to sabotage it, Europe is trying to sabotage it. Now, because it's so obvious the U.S. doesn't want peace, now people are talking about half the Trump administration is divided, and half of it wants to sabotage peace, and the other half still wants peace, because peace was never the plan. It was always a scam. And now it's becoming so obvious that no amount of rationalization can make up for it. But you're absolutely right. They cannot. They've realized we're not fighting Russia, China, and Iran all at the same time. We can see them moving air defense systems all around the globe to where they need them most at any specific moment. And then they have to move them back because they simply don't have enough. They've exhausted so many resources in Ukraine. And even though the type of conflict that they would fight in the Middle East or in Asia Pacific are different and would use different weapons the U.S. hasn't really expended in Ukraine. But there are certain systems that are used across the board that they have exhausted and that are in short supply. So they have really painted themselves into a deep corner. And that's why they're starting to say, because we all know people in our personal lives who lie themselves into a corner, and then like the lies become more and more ridiculous until like they don't even believe as they're saying it anybody's buying it. But what else will they do? They're not going to admit that they were wrong.
Eckhart Troll says, think Elon Musk and David Sachs actually think America first? No, they think cheap labor first, profits first. America is just a brand label for virtual signaling. I believe he meant America first. And that's what Brian and I were talking about at the beginning of the show. If America first was truly the mantra of the MAGA administration, they would deal with the massive homelessness that is all across America, but specifically, and first of all, the veteran homelessness, the mental health issues from veterans that are dealing with that, the physical issues that some veterans come home dealing with. They would up the pay and they would up the benefits for the veterans. They would attack the homelessness and the poverty all across, because charity starts at home, then it spreads abroad. You cannot make yourself safe by destabilizing somebody 7,000 miles away while allowing everything to fall apart at home. That's not how security works. There's an old saying, an old African proverb. It says, he who has no enemy within fears no enemy without, right? So if America contains the problems here first, address the core issues here, she won't be able to focus on things that she has no business focusing on other places. She's trying to bring democracy to Ukraine, so she says, and yet she's snuffing out democracy in America. Britain is snuffing out democracy in the UK. The European Union has little to no democracy, and they want to tell you that democracy is the way to go and the right way of governance. What we're seeing now is, as I often say, desperation, because I think they understand the time is limited and the debt burden has become too great. And what they're doing now is trying their best to disrupt everything. And like Sun Tzu says about an evil leader, an evil general, he would prefer to burn the kingdom down and rule over the ashes than allow others to rule the kingdom. Brian, what do you say on that matter?
Well, on this comment specifically about Elon Musk and David Sachs, I absolutely agree, because it's so obvious what the U.S. actually needs to do. The United States actually needs to look at what China has done to transform itself into a global leader and think, why couldn't we do that? Why can't we do that? Looking at Russia and, first you have to admit that the U.S. started this war in Ukraine, and it's 100% wrong, and it needs to end. But then also ask yourself, how come Russia, with such a smaller GDP and smaller military budget, how are they outproducing us in terms of ordnance all across the board, weapons and ammunition across the board? How is that happening? Because as I've just explained many times before, Russia and China, many other countries around the world, prioritize purpose over profit. It's not that they're disinterested in profit, but they understand that a government and nation exists for a purpose, and it's not just to generate profits. And in fact, if it only exists to generate profits and you pursue profit at all other costs, that's unsustainable. That is actually self-destructive. And we're watching the U.S. destroy itself because it is a system that pursues profit and power above all other things, including any sort of purpose. And so if the U.S. wanted to fix what is going on, we've talked about this, and I've talked about this endlessly. Invest in infrastructure, invest in education. But first of all, you have to take these corporate monopolies that have captured the U.S. government. You need to put them in their place. You need to take things like pharmaceuticals, the healthcare system, infrastructure, nationalize it. And people are saying, well, we have Amtrak, and look what a disaster it is. Look, Canada and the UK, they have universal health care. It's a complete disaster. And they use this to scare Americans into wanting universal health care or wanting government-funded infrastructure. But if you actually travel outside the collective West, even to a place like Thailand, which is not a superpower by any stretch of the imagination, they have universal health care, and it is excellent. They have government-funded infrastructure, mass transportation, trains that actually run on time, and trains that you wouldn't mind riding on. Unlike Amtrak, I've been on Amtrak. It is not an enjoyable experience. It's something you do as a last resort, really. And that's what you have to commit to. You have to get these corporations out because they are parasites and they are feeding on the United States at the expense of absolutely everyone else. So if David Sachs and Elon Musk really cared about the United States, if the MAGA movement really cared about the United States, they'd say, we're not going to raise the defense budget to $1 trillion or more dollars. We don't actually have a single nation on planet Earth that wants to harm us within our own actual borders. The only thing that Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, all of these nations threaten is American impunity around the globe, which shouldn't exist in the first place. So you want to cut spending, to talk about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Start by gutting the Department of Defense. All you need is a Navy along your shores. Nobody is crossing the Pacific or the Atlantic to invade the United States. It is so blatant at face value that I don't understand how people don't see it. And then you need to start reworking education. It's a for-profit sector. People put themselves in debt for 10 years or more just to get a degree. It shouldn't cost you anything or next to nothing to get a degree. You're investing in human resources that are literally building and running your civilization. And you're going to make it inaccessible. You're going to make education inaccessible just to squeeze more money out of each individual person. It's insanity. And the infrastructure, the healthcare, everything else follows suit. Invest in that. Get these corporate monopolies out. And then if they're not talking about doing that, they're not serious about, make America great again or make America great at all. They're not serious about it at all.
Chili Pepper, thank you for the $5 super chat. Brian, as Chili Pepper has a question directed to you. How much does Brian know of Operation Gladio that is still in operation today?
Well, Operation Gladio was the U.S. and through NATO arming and backing literal former Nazis from World War II to carry out terrorism all across Europe and pose as being communists and blame it on communists. So they were false. It was a network carrying out false flag attacks to scare people about communism, to divide and distract people, divide them against each other, distract people, and create a pretext for the U.S., NATO, and everything it was doing in Europe and well beyond Europe. And so it most certainly is still being carried out today. Instead of communists, what they have done is they've taken extremists that they themselves have cultivated through their partnership with nations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and they have radicalized them, and they've created, the Muslim threat. And of course, these extremists have nothing to do with Islam. They do it in the name of Islam, but that's about it. And they use them to divide and distract the European public. And the Islamophobia industry is huge. It was built up during the War on Terror, and it persists to this day. And so you're talking about the immigrants and the Islamic extremists that you hear them talking about in Europe, and there's whole segments of the population that really believe Islam is coming to get them. They believe that it's Islam in general. They don't understand that this is an operation being carried out by the West and their own security services. It has nothing to do with Islam. The people who are fighting and dying and paying the highest cost against these extremists are actual Muslims back in their home countries where this is all being cultivated. The conflicts that drive these extremists out of the country into Europe in the first place. So it's just another one of those things. It appeals to the lizard brain that we all have from evolution and that instinctual desire or reaction to the things that look different. And you automatically react to it instead of thinking about it and analyzing it. So yeah, this is what Operation Gladio is doing as of today. And I remember U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance was giving some talk in Europe and lecturing them about free speech, even though it's being curtailed back in the U.S. by the Trump administration itself. And his whole speech was about these supposed Islamic extremists, and it was in Munich, and there was a attack in Munich like hours before he gave this speech. What a coincidence! Almost as if it was staged.
Yeah. Donald Metlock had a good point. He said China stole the hypersonic missile tech that we don't even have. But Brian, that's what they want to make us believe, that China is stealing stuff that the United States does not even have.
President Trump actually said that, not about China, but he said Russia stole U.S. hypersonic missile technology. That's how they have hypersonic missiles, although somehow the U.S. doesn't. Yeah, it's crazy. And then China like come to the United States and like steal all the high-speed rail and put it on a boat and bring it back to China, which is why they have the largest high-speed rail network on Earth. And the U.S. doesn't even have a single mile because the Chinese literally physically stole it. I mean, people have to think when they hear these things.
Mm-hmm. Lockbert says, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says Trump posed as a dove in the campaign with Tulsi pushing it, but is governing as a big hawk, both for Israel and for the USA war machine. That's for you, Brian.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's what every politician does in human history. They tell you what you want to hear when they're campaigning, and then they do whatever the donor class wants them to do. And as far as doing this for Israel, this is a huge misconception. I want to beg people to please zoom out from the Middle East, look at the entire globe, and look at how Israel is just one of many proxies the U.S. builds up and backs, unconditionally, to the point where you're like, if you only look at Israel and its relationship with the U.S., you would say, well, that's weird. I mean, the U.S. does everything for Israel. What kind of control must Israel have over the U.S.? Look at what the U.S. has been doing for Ukraine. They've just been pumping billions and billions of dollars and weapons, unconditionally supporting Ukraine no matter what they do. They have literal Nazis with Nazi patches on their uniforms running around. The U.S. is apologizing for it or covering it up actively. So does Ukraine also control the United States? And look at what the U.S. is doing on the island province of Taiwan, the same exact thing. Do all of these countries and local regional areas, do they control the United States, or are these just proxies the U.S. builds up and appears to be unconditionally supporting because they are fighting on behalf of the U.S.?
So what do you think, Brian, about what Trump said sitting next to Netanyahu about Iran? If Iran does not, because people keep saying that Trump is trying to negotiate with Iran, but I keep telling him there's a difference. He's not negotiation; he's after total capitulation, and that's a difference. Because if he was after negotiation, he would have never pulled out of the JCPOA. Instead, he is trying to force Iran to capitulate on its national security by bringing in Iran's domestic missile defenses, the missile building, and which has nothing to do with the nuclear program. And he's trying to keep tabs on what Iran can and can't do for its national security. So what do you think about this, saying these things, threatening Iran while Netanyahu is sitting right next to him?
It's insane that any American or any person with a functioning brain could look at what the U.S. is doing regarding Iran and think, what authority does the U.S. itself have to talk to Iran or talk about Iran's nuclear program at all? The U.S. is the only country that's ever used nuclear weapons on another country. And all throughout its history since dropping 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, even though Japan was already defeated at that point, all throughout their history, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, even Afghanistan, they've actually seriously considered using nuclear weapons again. They have one of the largest nuclear arsenals on Earth. They're not going to disarm, and they have threatened non-nuclear nations with nuclear weapons, and they have used their conventional military to bully, invade, and illegally occupy nations all around the globe for decades and decades. And so for the US to tell Iran, we're concerned about your nuclear program, they're concerned about their nuclear program because if they actually acquire a nuclear weapon, they're not going to be able to bully Iran anymore. And they know that. And if you look at the think tank papers, the special interests actually driving US foreign policy, they admit that in their papers. They know that Iran's not going to acquire a nuclear bomb and then just start shooting nuclear-tipped missiles at everybody. They know it's a deterrence. They know it's the end game for US bullying in the region, and it further constrains them globally. A lot of people are convinced that the US is obsessed with Iran because that's what Israel wants. But again, zoom out and look at a map of Eurasia. And as you always say, Rashid, Iran is the soft underbelly of Eurasia. You have multipolarism being held up by these pillars, and Iran is kind of the weak link, the weak pillar among the three: China, Russia, Iran. These are the three major pillars for multipolarism in Eurasia, and that is the weak pillar. And if they knock out Iran, they're going to bring multipolarism collapsing on Russia and China as well. That is their plan. So it has nothing, Israel is just being used as a proxy, just like Ukraine is being used as a proxy, just like the island province of Taiwan is being used as a proxy, just like the Philippines are being used as a proxy, the exact same relationship. And it is for global ambitions, not some petty regional ambition of Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, people have to get real.
I think because people, they compartmentalize everything.
Yes.
They don't connect all the dots, so they don't see the grand scale, the bigger picture of things, because they follow the news, and the news will only report this over here or this over here, and the news doesn't tell the people that this is because this over here or this happened because this over here. And I think that's purposely done to keep dumbing down the people so that those in power can maintain power at the expense of everybody else. But I do want to ask you this: do you think war is coming with Iran? Because it seems like it's coming.
It's impossible to tell for sure, because even if the U.S. says, yes, we're going to go to war with Iran because these are the factors, these are the conditions on the ground, those conditions can always change. Because we've seen many junctures where the U.S. came very close to going to war with Iran, and then they backed off. And it's because the reality on the ground was changing rapidly. They feel like this is a huge opportunity because they've knocked out Syria, they've eliminated the senior leadership of Hezbollah, and now they're waging war on Yemen. And I think a lot of this hinges on how this fighting with Yemen goes, because if they're struggling with Ansar Allah in Yemen, and those capabilities that Yemen has developed or has received from Iran through whatever channels, if that is complicating U.S. military operations just in that regard, what does that say about a much wider conflict with Iran itself? However, and this is something that we've agreed on for a long time now, the U.S. is desperate. They're out of time. The clock is ticking for U.S. hegemony. If the U.S. was only concerned about America's best interests, America as a nation state, America as a people, this wouldn't be a big deal. There would be no urgency here. Like I said, you could rebuild your industry, fix your education. There's no time limit. You don't have to rush to do this. Why are they rushing? Why are they rolling out such extreme policies, threatening Iran so extremely, putting such extreme tariffs on China? Because they know they're out of time. And if you've been following this for years, like we have, you could see, you remember when BRICS was just a word that people started, it was so tenuous back then, and it didn't happen overnight. It took years and years and years, but it's gaining critical mass. And once a certain threshold is passed, it will be irreversible. The United States will not be able to reverse it. And so this is what they're racing against. And they always talk about how China is racing to take Taiwan back, which is already part of China, by the way, by 2025 or 2027, where it is 2025, by the way. It's not China is racing. It is the United States, because they understand that China's military, economic, industrial power continues to grow and grow to the point where the U.S. will be at a juncture where nothing they do is going to make any difference.
Okay, so now I want to ask you. There was something one of them wanted to ask you. God, it just jumped on me. I'm sorry. I tried to highlight it, everybody, but the screen jumped on me, and I apologize. I'll scroll through again and see if I can pull it up. But Brian, we talk about the empire being desperate and out of time, and just doing things just to see if anything sticks to the wall for them. A lot of people, they tend to believe that because of what the Houthis are doing, or and Surah Allah is doing, is keeping the U.S. military at bay. But here, I want to further something here. The United States understands that if Iran remains stable, if Iran becomes a major factor in the BRICS and in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, then there goes the dollar. The dollar is the central, the life's blood of the world and the U empire. Without that being accepted around the globe, the United States can't fund its deficits. It can't expand its military. It can't maintain the bases around the world. So I believe that they will do the insane to try to maintain their hegemony, because they understand that they don't have many options, and they're trying to find the best of the worst options.
Yes, absolutely. And the craziest part about all of this is the United States could still be a functioning, influential, prosperous society, a nation state, and it could play a constructive role among all other nations, but they insist on imposing themselves upon all other nations. And so this irrational desire, and in their minds, because the collective West has for generations ruled over the planet. And so in their mind, this is because they are inherently superior. And you could hear it in absolutely everything they say and do, no matter how many advantages China ends up with. In their mind, they think, well, the white West is inherently superior. We're inherently superior to the Chinese. Doesn't matter how many of them there are. Doesn't matter what they build or what they do. We can out-innovate them because we're smarter. We're better at innovation. Like when you say you're better at innovation than someone else, when you have such a smaller population, less infrastructure, a disastrous education system, it's because you think you're just inherently superior. I mean, what else could it possibly mean? And so this is their mindset, and that's dangerous. Because there was this guy with a mustache that thought kind of like that a couple of decades ago, who thought like he and his people were racially superior to everyone else. Didn't matter how many Soviets there were. They're all rotting. They're subhuman, and all we have to do is kick the door, and the whole thing will come crumbling down. And look at how that ended. And I see a lot of unfortunate and frightening parallels between that and here. And by the way, all those ideas that Nazi Germany came up with, I mean, it was copied and pasted from racist ideas from the United States and the United Kingdom. Eugenics, that was grafted from the Anglo-Americans onto Nazi Germany. I just, people should be aware of that. It's not like Nazi Germany sprouted out of thin air. It drew heavily from the Anglo-American mindset, which still persists to this day.
And don't forget, a lot of the people in the U.S. funded the Nazi war machine.
Yes.
But Chili Pepper says, is this all about destroying BRICS?
In a way, because what is BRICS? BRICS is an alternative. It's an alternative system. It's an alternative collection of interests that are working in a different direction from American unipolarism. If America demands primacy over the whole entire globe, it demands primacy over everything that's happening on the globe. And what BRICS is doing is their own program that the U.S. has less and less influence over. So yes, they have to destroy BRICS. They have to destroy the individual, subordinate the individual components of BRICS, and they have to maintain their primacy, or all of this goes away. And once it goes away forever. I don't think people understand. The collective West had so much superiority over the rest of the world because the Industrial Revolution began in the West, and it took so long for technology to proliferate worldwide. But now it is fully proliferated. And so the factors that matter most now is the size of your population, how much you're investing in human resources and infrastructure. That's what's going to give you the greatest advantage. There is no way for a little tiny country like the UK or the US relative to the rest of the world to maintain primacy over the rest of the world unless you destroy the current global system and throw us back decades. Then it might be possible to reassert. And that's where their mindset is right now. That's why this is so dangerous and frightening.
Okay. Chili Pepper again with the $10 super chat. Did Trump post that Yemeni gathering of civilians getting wasted on purpose or because of sheer stupidity?
So it's so hard to tell. I mean, he
That's
knows. He knows that the average Trump supporter doesn't care. They don't care the answer to that question. They don't care who these people are. They're brown people getting blown up by Americans, and so that makes them happy. Unfortunately, that is a large part of the Trump support base. Not everyone, but a large. There is a large segment of the Trump support base that are anti-war, and are, like, they're shocked and surprised that Trump is trying to lay waste to Yemen, which I don't know why they're surprised, because this is what he did all 4 years he was in office last time, was continue all the wars he inherited and attempt to start new wars. So it's hard to tell, but the United States government in general, Republican, Democrat, they know the average American either doesn't have time to pay attention, and the ones who are paying attention, this is all about America showing everyone who is boss. And if you look at the comment section or the responses to people who are posting those videos, people say, I don't care, they're all terrorists, they're pirates. Like they're rationalizing it, no matter how irrational it actually is.
Chili Pepper once again put the same question up with another $10 super chat. Thank you so much. But Brian, I want to play something for you. You have to just give me a little patience with this. Is Gregory Manarino. I've had him on my show multiple times, and I want you to listen to what he has to say about Trump and what is happening to America. Then on the backside of that, I want your analysis on this. So everybody pay attention to this.
April 8th, 2025. Anyway, so an extremely volatile day here in the stock market. The trade war is worsening. We have not made a shred, the Duppy, President Trump, not one bit of progress here. It's really a shame. Let me say this about what's happening here. President Trump was given, let me tell you something, okay? The Almighty, gives us all an opportunity to shine. Here, it appears to me that the Almighty did give President Trump, I won't call him the Duppy right now, even though he is, an opportunity here to actually use the skill that he has, the power of negotiation. Instead of, again, getting in here with world leaders individually or a few at a time and sitting down and discussing how to come up with a fair trade deal, what does he do? He sends the world into some kind of absolutely, I don't know what you want to call this, destroying trillions upon trillions upon trillions. Probably, like, so far, it's got to be close to $15 trillion of the U.S. market alone. Worldwide, it's much worse than that. But again, what would you expect from a destroyer? He's not a builder. You see, the deal is very simple. If, in fact, Trump had negotiation skills, as he says he does, he's the great negotiator, that would have required time. It would have required patience. But that's really not what was meant to happen here. This is being destroyed. And it's being destroyed for a reason, okay, to allow the central banks to inflate. We're going to see full-on QE here soon. I am telling you guys and girls right now what you already know. More than likely here in the United States, we are going to go negative. We're going to see negative rates, which means The cash that you have in the bank, they're going to start siphoning it off, because you have to pay the bank to keep your cash there. Make it up. You can't make this stuff up. So again, understand what you're seeing here. This whole thing was sold to legions of people who are possessed or spiritually dispossessed by legions here, that this was the only way. This is our negotiation tactic. We're not going to slam the entire world and even penguins with tariffs, because that's the way to go. Because you see, he's telling you right there, I can't negotiate nothing. I can't negotiate my way out of a paper bag. You see, but it's really much deeper than that. What President Trump is doing here, working with the Fed and the European Central Bank and a couple of other ones, is bringing the world economy to its knees to allow the central banks to fulfill their goal. What's the goal of every single central bank on the planet? Well, I can't say every single one. I'm going to say like the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, the so-called, I don't know, whatever. Those used to align themselves with the United States, but now they're our enemies. I don't know. But the goal is the same here, to own it all, to issue debt through one door, buy it back through another door. It makes them stronger. It makes us weaker. That's why President Duppy was selected here. I told you guys and girls before the selection, whoever they chose, cackling lovely Kamala or whatever this thing is over here, the Duppy man, okay, that would be the biggest traitor to the United States. I told you that. I told you whoever they chose would be the biggest traitor because they'd work directly with the Fed to help them fulfill their goal. Well, you know who the biggest traitor is now, don't you? Yeah, it seems like you do. Again, look, man, you guys are girls, some of you can't handle it. And that's okay. Because one day you're going to come around and say, you know what? Everything Greg said is that we're out of time. We're out of time. Greg, you're not giving Trump enough time. Time for what? Time to destroy us all? To get his promise that you're going to get lower rates, which you're getting anyway. The Fed is going to institute full-on QE. To destroy the dollar sounds great. Let's give him more time to do that. We can write executive orders about going from paper straws to plastic straws. That's what he's focused on. President Trump, let me tell you something about the Duppy here. Not one. He doesn't even have an economic plan. What is it, tariffs and war? Real war. I said, well, it's all war. Economic war is real war. Okay, and you and I and the people of the entire world are the casualties of this war and the kinetic war that we're in. The peace president, he was going to end all the wars in one day. How did that work out? Not too well. Did you buy that one? Really? Honestly? Can't make it up. You can't do it. My hair.
So what do you have to say about, because he went on a tangent about Trump. Go ahead, Brian.
I mean, a lot of people in the comment section are commenting on the possibility that he might be stoned. But when someone who is possibly stoned makes infinitely more sense than the sober people in Washington, I mean, what is, let's think about that. And he made a lot of really good points. He's talking about this is an act of destruction. Absolutely. The United States is rushing, without doubt. And what is the U.S. administration doing? And what does every U.S. administration do? They're exploiting American ignorance, their sense of exceptionalism, their arrogance. This is why when President Trump posts a video snuffing out armed people meeting together, as if Yemeni Central Command is issuing orders regarding missiles, complex missile systems targeting ships out at sea. They're going to all come into a big circle in the middle of the desert to hand out orders. It doesn't make any sense, but to many Americans, it doesn't matter. They're appealing to their ignorance, their arrogance, their sense of exceptionalism, their sense of superiority. They cannot accept. They collect what a real U.S. leader would do is prepare the American people to accept reality that America is not exceptional. It is not superior to anyone. It is made up of human beings, and human beings everywhere you go are basically the same. And because the United States no longer has all of these advantages, and I would say ill-gotten advantages over many decades, and because there are nations out there that are larger and now more powerful than the United States, the U.S. has to accept a rational, proportional role among all other nations. The idea, and this is something nobody can deny, that President Trump, Biden before him, Obama before that, They have all talked about American exceptionalism or American leadership or whatever the euphemism is that they want to use. They're talking about American primacy over the entire planet, a country that makes up 4% of the global population, ruling over the other 96%. It doesn't make any sense. And the American people need to accept something that makes sense. They need to accept reality. And what they're being sold instead is fantasy. And it is violent. And I agree with him. It's being rushed because they're out of time. I think that's something I, and you, Rashid, and many others are starting to, you can sense it. It's palpable. They're in a rush. They are out of time. They are rushing. If you have ever been to China, now I was to China many years ago, 2006, 2007. And even then, you could see how massive the changes. You could feel the sense of industry and progress. I was in Shanghai and I've never been anywhere that big and that busy in my life since then, before then, and since then. And Asia in general is exploding with activity and industry and progress. Carl Zai, I just met him. He just came here to Thailand. I think the last time he made a trip here was 2002. And he was shocked by how much progress has been made in Thailand. And you know why Thailand has experienced all of this positive progress, why you go even way out of Bangkok and you still see amazing infrastructure and development. It's because of China. The rise of China has enabled the rise of everyone around them, everyone cooperating with them. And what is America's goal? And just as your other guest pointed out, the goal is to just destroy it all. To destroy it all and hope the U.S. comes out in a better position among the ashes, as you have repeatedly said, and be able to rebuild their primacy on top of that, which is insane. And it's going to hurt all of us, especially Americans. They will be among the worst victimized.
Okay. So this we'll be bringing the show to a close. Brian it's early Brian's time, but so we'll get 7 questions. Brian, how about 7 questions?
Sure. No, I'm fine. I'm not in any rush.
Okay. Nassim, my son's name is Nassim. Nassim Max Mansour says, they say history repeats itself. Brian, how long before Europe enters the dark ages? Just a ballpark estimate, please.
This is the craziest thing. They don't have to. The U.S. doesn't have to collapse. Europe doesn't have to collapse. All they have to do is just accept a rational, proportional role to play globally. That's all they have to do to avoid war, to avoid collapse, to avoid all of the horrors that they are now experiencing. There's no reason for Americans to be suffering under a cost of living crisis. This is imposed 100% because of the greed and obsession American leadership has with primacy. This is the only reason. And so, it could happen inevitably if people in the collective West do not do something about this, do not recognize that it's not Washington, it's Wall Street. It's these corporations that you're paying into every single day. Every time you get your paycheck and you're handing that money out, you need to do everything in your power to try to reduce the amount you're giving to these unelected corporate special interests. And people argue with me about this, but it does make a difference. If individually it won't, but if everyone is doing this collectively, even a little bit, it's going to make a difference. Stop giving your money to these big corporations. I know people in America who are being crushed under the cost of living. They still make the effort to deny even just a little bit of their money going to these corporations that are responsible for destroying the country for American people, for their own benefit. So I don't know how.
Put your question in real quick.
Yeah, I don't know how soon. I don't know how soon it's going to go into the dark ages, but that it's self-inflicted and it's not inevitable. But as long as these interests prevail, I think it is. I can't tell for sure though.
Do you think this is from me? Do you think that the Ukrainian line will collapse within the next few weeks, and do you believe that Russia will push up towards the Dnieper soon?
Again, I'm not going to talk about timelines. People have been trying to predict that all along. All I know is that Russia is fighting a war of attrition against Ukraine and their U.S. backers, and it is collapsing. And the rate that it is collapsing at is accelerating. When does that collapse take place? I don't know. But as long as Russia keeps pushing, it is inevitable. When that's a question that we have to continuously look at the battlefield to try to discern. Right now, I don't think that it's clear, and I don't think it will be a matter of weeks.
Okay. The next one says, question for Brian. If the U.S. is able to somehow get the production for F-47 and its Navy 6th gen fighter jet on schedule, how will that impact a potential U.S.-China war in the Pacific?
That is a big if, because I mean, look at the F-35. The F-35, and before that, the F-22. These were the F-35, especially, is a $2 trillion plus weapons program. It is still having teething problems, and it is supposed to be a 5th generation stealth warplane that is conducting standoff strikes because Russian and Chinese air defense systems and the nations that buy these defense systems can see it and could potentially shoot it down. So they're using this $2 trillion weapons program to carry off standoff strikes that Russia is using the Tupolev 95 Bear. It's just, you see this, like, it looks like a B-52 bomber, but it has like World War II or early Cold War propellers on it, because that's all you need, because you don't come anywhere even close to enemy air defenses. You're shooting a missile that then travels and runs the gauntlet amid enemy air defenses. And that's what the F-35 is being used for. So it's this profit over purpose. And it is a disease that infects every aspect of America, including its ability to fight and win the wars it wants to fight and win for its empire.
The next question is from Dragonfly. Brian, what do you think will happen if Israel hits Iran nuclear facility?
It's another difficult question because, first of all, Iran has protected its nuclear facilities to a high degree. They anticipate that they're going to be targeted. So they have invested a lot in protecting them. And, it's questionable. What will they do in response? Are they going to strike Israel? Maybe it's going to be a limited strike, a proportional strike, let's say. Or maybe they won't do anything at all. A lot of people think that Iran, people personally want to see Iran get revenge against U.S.-Israeli aggression. But in reality, if you are Iran, you have to think in depth, and you have to think several steps ahead, and you have to do what is strategically sound, not what is emotionally satisfying. So there's a possibility that they won't do anything at all. That there is a possibility. Or their response will be extremely measured. They know that there is a strategy to draw Iran into a huge, large-scale war, that the U.S. can justify, mobilizing itself fully militarily, and they don't want to jump headfirst into that trap. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to predict. But it could range everything from the breakout of all-out war to Iran having a very muted strategic response.
Our next question is from Anna Jackson. Question: any thoughts on Yoon in South Korea?
I think this is in reference to this South Korean puppet president, American puppet president, who tried to stage some kind of coup. And, it's very hard to tell what's going on within these U.S. politically captured proxies. But what is interesting to note is the selective outrage the U.S. has. If this was a country the U.S. didn't like or was putting pressure on, a country that had independent foreign policy, you would never hear the end of, because I'm in Thailand. Thailand has carried out two military coups against U.S.-backed client regimes to oust them from power. And the U.S. would not ever stop complaining and screaming and wringing its hands and beating its chest over these two coups. Like, they still talk about it to this day. But it happens in South Korea. One of their own proxies is doing this, almost certainly to the benefit of U.S. policy, not South Korean interests, and we hear hardly anything at all about it. So it's very telling about the selective outrage the U.S. has and how they don't uphold principles, they hide behind them.
The next one, it says, does Brian think that if they don't go to war with Iran, they will pivot to Asia?
Well, I mean, they have to do both, and in reality, they're looking at a strategy of Russia, Iran, and China, and everything in between. So it is a full court press, but they just don't have enough resources to be everywhere at once. This is why they're trying to freeze Ukraine, maybe knock out Iran quickly, or to do something there quickly, and then continue doubling down on the Asia Pacific region. Of course, you have to remember, Russia, Iran, and China are not just going to stand still and do nothing while all of this happens.
Well, Brian, you hit it out the park, man. I really appreciate you coming on the platform, giving me more exposure, man. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you, man.
Well, thank you. And people in the alternative media, we have to work together. People helped me, and I want to help you and every other person out there in the alternative media that has quality views. And Rashid, you, like, when I first saw your first discussion with Carl Zah, it's just so refreshing to see people that can see straight through it and don't buy the political rhetoric one way or the other. It's so rare. And so of course, I'm happy to come on your show. I'm happy to have you on my show. And I think cooperation, the mindset, and this is the multipolar mindset too, isn't it? All boats rise with the tide.
Thank you, my friend. And I'll see you this weekend.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, everybody, hit the like button. If you're not a member or a channel member on Brian's channel, go do that. Support his work just like you support ours. And we thank every one of you for joining us. Now, in closing, I always say do right by others, not because there's some material gain or some accolades to get behind that. Do right because it's the godly and the humane thing to do. And remember, even when no one else is watching you, God is watching you. My mom always says, God sits high, but he looks low. I want to thank each and every one of you. And I say this from the bottom of my heart. If you love truth, I love you, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true. But above all things, remember to stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you all. Peace. We're out of here.
My first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face, but what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a